Yay! Another video from the car. Um, yeah, I've been trying to kind of over all these ideas on my head of what to talk about in this one. Each week I'm trying to think of something else from the past. In Grandpa style, as someone actually commented. Keep going, Grandpa. I think it was. Um, Although I'm not a grandpa. I'm not that old. Well, I could be that old. I mean, I've got friends who've got children that have children, and I've got um, you know I think I think it's only my sister. One of my sisters has got is a grand. But anyway, um, unless anything's changed, I don't know because I live quite far away from them and I don't see them that often. So things change and I may not know. But anyway, I'm going off into a tangent again. Um, so having to thinking about what I want to talk about this week, and I kind of thought, let's talk about size, shall we? This is kind of going into the next sort of 6 months to a year beyond the last stories I've talked about. But I'm going to go back a little bit further to begin with. Before I kind of went back into education and university and then came out and worked as a software engineer, I first left school at the tender age of, well, I was 15 actually, but I started work about 2 days after my 16th birthday. And I worked about 3 years or so in the building trade, maybe just a little bit over, but thereabouts. And I remember we used to do a lot of work for some UK banks, and in one of them, it was a data center. I went in and we had to do some work in the basically the data storage tape deck room, which is really weird because when you walked in there used to be like these sticky pads on the floor you walk across to get all the dust off your feet. But I'd walk into this room and it was the size of about, say, half a football pitch, right, UK football pitch, and it was just full of tape deck machines. And what's funny, imagine the size of that. And what's funny is that probably all that data can fit inside your laptop now on your SSD hard drive, if you've still got one of those, because the amount of data that they store was, nowhere near really the equivalent of what you can store these days just on a laptop hard drive. I'm going to refer to a hard drive because that's the first thing that comes to my head. I know most of them are SSDs now, but still we call it a hard drive. So that's the kind of the beginner scale. And when I first worked in development, most people had like one 17-inch monitor, and they were CRT monitors. In fact, I used to have CRT, flat screen CRT. I remember when the flat screen CRT came out. That was kind of a push forward, because pre that it was all the old sort of curved screens. I remember on my Commodore Amiga having a curved screen, and on my TVs were curved screens. But I used to have a 17-inch monitor, and that seemed quite large at the time. And they were large because CRTs were large things. They weren't small little flat tops. They were, took a big percentage of your desk. But I worked on a project. This is where I was ducking in and out of Ireland. I might have mentioned it. This is a time where I found the core dump tool that core dumped in one of my previous stories. And I remember I had a desk area in the UK, and I moved over to the other side of the building on the same floor that I was on. Really nice building, actually. Had this kind of floor that went, this bridge that went over floors, and there was probably the best coffee machines I've ever seen. And they weren't like, the brilliant sort of fresh bean ones, but what I mean is you go there and they had about 30 different things you could select from, all sorts of coffee and soups and all sorts. Brilliant it was. I used to go there on a Sunday morning with a hangover to get my fresh bits of soup and things like that. Anyway, I was working on this other side of the building, and we had about 2 desks each, luckily, because it was quite a lot of space. And someone had stopped using this 24-inch monitor. I believe it was 24-inch. I'm sure it was 24-inch monitor, which again was a CRT monitor. Now, to move it safely, it took 2 of us, right? I mean, you could have carried it on your own, but to move it safely, it took 2, yeah? So you can imagine the weight of it. And I had it on my desk. I kind of had this kind of, I thought that maybe the desk would start bowing over time, but it took up a big percentage of my desk. And back then, most people used to rely on having books on their desk for their development, stuff like that. So, luckily I had 2 desks. But yeah, the sheer size of it was immense. And, I've got a 34-inch ultra wide as my main driver laptop at home, and then I have another, I can't remember if it's 22 or 24-inch ultra wide on the laptop. Yeah, at work you have like 22, 24 inches. You have 2 of them. Usually most companies don't give you 2 monitors. Normally they're on arms above the desk, so they don't take up much space. But yeah, a dog barking somewhere around here. I don't know where it is. But yeah, so it's just the sheer size of technology back then. Push forward 20, I think that was about 23 years ago, maybe. But push forward that kind of amount of time, and everything's really, thin and small, and yeah, a lot better. Takes up a lot less space, and they are a lot better monitors, to be fairly honest, because they're all HD. Whereas back in the CRT, they were like 800 by 600. You'd be lucky if you got 1080. 800 by 600, I think they were. But yeah, the sheer size of technology back then as compared to now, it's just remarkable, and we're only getting smaller. So yeah, blast from the past, the sheer size of technology compared to today. Those who are starting out today, be blessed in comparison to what we had to deal with back then, because you become a weightlifter lifting all half the technology. It was huge. Right, that's it for another week. I'm going to go now, and I'll speak to you next week, and hopefully Saturday I'll get another bit of code up. Bye for now.